Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and today I have a special guest. Not only do we have Todd Evans here, but we've got Scott Byron, who is the A&R rep for Matthew Sweet. This is the gentleman that brought Matthew Sweet to Zoo. So stay tuned.
One of the things that you talked about, Grant, about the when you did your girlfriend show was that they just kept recording. I don't think that was the case. You know, you talked about how they were having such a good time, they just kept recording. I think they recorded, you know, all of these songs, and then we're deciding which 10 or 12 or 11 or whatever it is that went on 12 that were going to go on the vinyl 6 and 6, and then there were 3 that didn't fit, and I think
those 3.
And then I think, you know, the original intention was to have those as bonus tracks for singles or whatever, but then when they're, you know, now CDs are predominant, we have room to put them on, so they decided to put the record noise on there to kind of like make it clear that this is the record that they would have put out if they could put it out on vinyl.
Right.
There's also a little gap there too.
That was my,
even though it goes 12 to 13.
Yeah, that was my doing.
The quote that I saw Matthew Sweet said, I just kept adding extra songs because I was having so much fun in the studio. And it was just such a joy to hear and what we made sound like by adding everybody's thing. I just kept cramming them in. I was so enamored.
But I don't know the order that they recorded everything, but they certainly didn't record the album in order. You know, they just, you know, they recorded a whole lot of stuff and then they sequenced it. And that's how it worked for the later records too. You know, we did the packaging, and also, you know, one of the things, I mean, if you hold that up again, Todd,
the front,
you know,
or the back?
The bar on the right.
Oh,
yeah. Right. What is that?
And, well, that's to like make it square, you know, like a record album.
Gotcha.
You know, it's just, you know, to make the picture square. That's really all there is to it. You know, it's trying to have that spirit of it being a vinyl record.
Okay, because you've got this side where the little case is, and then you've got something on here, so it's symmetrical. And
exactly,
I got it.
That was really all there was to it. And the art department, the guy Lee Hammond, he was the person in charge of design. He did a wonderful job with the package. I spent a few weeks poring through it, fixing every damn typo that was. And, you know, Matthew sends in his lyrics, and there were probably, you know, a few hundred mistakes in there. And I was a magazine editor before, so I sat there with my headphones and a printout, and I went through and marked up every mistake and had them fix it.
That seems like something that's not being done anymore, because in current day, CDs have all kinds of typos on them.
Yeah, but I was
that's a lost art.
Anal. I was very anal about that. If I'm putting out my first record as an AR person, I want it to be right.
Yeah,
so
I get it.
I spent an awful lot of time working on the packaging and making sure the text of the packaging, not the design. So then, you know, so now we have a package and we have a record, and it's a question of marketing. Now, keep in mind that they don't have very high expectations because of what happened with A&M. So I knew a lot about alternative marketing because of my time at CMJ. So I went to them with a proposal. I said, give me a small budget and 3 months, and I'll hire a company to help get things started. Now, Zoo had an alternative marketing person, but really the company was not geared to do this sort of thing. You know, they weren't ready for it yet. I needed to prove to the company itself that this was a viable record. So I said, you know, give me a small budget and we'll get this started. And I hired with the cooperation of the alternative marketing person, Lisa Cristiano, we hired a company called Thirsty Ear, they were a small staff, but they had one person who was in charge of alternative radio, one person who was in charge of alternative press, who turns out was Michael Crumper, the guy who first told me about the record at A&M and then had left A&M, and the person who was in charge of alternative retail. And alternative and retail, as you certainly know, Todd, at that point, you had to work retail to get attention. You need to make sure they're stocking the record. You need to make sure they have displays. You need to make sure they have flats. You need flats to 12 by 12 pictures of the album cover.
I got a stack in the garage.
Of girlfriend?
No, of all different things.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
He probably has quite a collection.
Me too. You need to make sure they have posters, and so they had an alternative radio person, an alternative press person, and alternative press was a really big deal at that point too. Right now, everything's kind of on the internet, but back then, fanzines and local newspapers, was a Creative Loafing in Georgia, and the Village Voice in New York, and the Chicago Reader. Alternative press was a really big deal. So Michael was out there working alternative press, and Mike Studo was in charge of radio. He was doing a great job with radio, and I had all these contacts at other record companies from when I was there, and I contacted all of my friends at other record companies doing college radio promotion, and I sent them copies of the record and the advances and then the CD when it came out. And I said, I hope you really like this. And if you do, I hope you'll talk about it. That was kind of a thing at that point. If you wanted credibility with a college radio programmer, you couldn't just call up and promote the record that you were working on. You had to talk music. You had to talk about the records that you liked. And then you could get around to talking about whatever you're promoting and say, I hope you'll listen to it. I hope you'll play it. It ended up that pretty much the entire alternative record community was working this record because everybody loved it. And I sent it to them. And there was a story at one point where one college radio person said, how many fucking companies are working this record? And none of them were being paid. Only Mike was being paid, and Lisa was being paid to work the record. It was, but everybody was talking about it. And Karen Glauber at Hits, she's working on the record. I don't think we had hired them either. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. But she's talking about the record. Everybody is talking about the record. CMJ puts it on the cover because they love the record and because I had worked there before, and everybody is promoting the record, and it ends up doing very well. It goes top 5 on the Modern Rock Airplay charts. It goes top 5 in CMJ. I don't remember what the final numbers were at this point. It's been, 40 years now? 30
Oh,
years
you
now.
say that, then I feel really old, but okay.
Yeah, well, me too. Everybody's working the record. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything here.
No, you're good.
So I wanted to show a couple of pictures while you're looking at that. So this is the picture on the back of the booklet for Earth. Okay. And so now you've got this guy on the back of the booklet, a girlfriend. It's almost like it's a different guy. Whoever was responsible for the visuals as far as what he looked like really did a fantastic job. And if that was Matthew, then that's really
the photographer's name was a guy named Michael Kaplan, who was recommended by the art department at Zoo.
There's another one. That's like
that's a great photo.
Yeah, Michael was brilliant. Michael did a lot of stuff. There was actually, Michael was big on props, and there are a whole bunch of outtakes from that session that have Matthew holding a prop gun. And I refused to let them put any of those pictures in the package.
That's probably a good idea.
I didn't want any gun imagery, but there is, let me see if I can find it quickly here. There is one. So there's the color in the reissue. There's the color picture of Tuesday. There was one.
Yeah, is that like the legacy version, the remaster?
Yeah. That's the one that I keep in my rack now. The rest are the others are filed away somewhere. But there is one picture of Matthew where he's standing upright. Maybe it's in the package that you have, Todd, where if you look way down at the bottom, he's holding the gun in his hand. I don't know if you can.
Is
if you have it.
is that this one? Is that
Maybe
what
it's
I'm
cropped out of the photo.
seeing at the bottom
I think the
left?
gun is in his other hand there. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Um,
Bottom right, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Oh, put that back up that you just had.
Sure.
There.
Yeah.
Just a little aside. You see down at the bottom there, there's the Superdeformed logo. That was Superdeformed. Matthew was enamored of all things Japanese, and Superdeformed was a Japanese thing. It was, you know how they're big on
anime and all that.
Anime, obviously, because we used the anime for the video, but action figures.
Oh yeah,
they're big on that sort of thing. There was and you've heard of Pop in this country, Pop action figures that are kind of smaller. Superdeformed was a Japanese thing that was kind of like Pop, where they would take famous action figures and they would scrunch them down small and distort them. And Matthew loved that word, Superdeformed, that was used to market these Japanese action figures. And he adopted it as his kind of production company name, a Superdeformed production. He actually has a tattoo of that logo as well, Matthew does. And that was done by the Zoo Art Department as well. So yeah, we I had the demos and we did the Superdeformed EP, which was designed for college radio, but so we did it on vinyl and we did it on CD to help promote the record. And then it came time to, things were going very well with the initial promotion, and the record company is going to take up the ball from there and start working it as a commercial radio release. So we did some showcases. We brought, Matthew and his band out to Los Angeles, and we did a showcase at the Club Lingerie, which was basically just for the record company and a maybe, 50 or 60 other people who the record company invited local to LA, and all the people that I talked about earlier who worked for other record companies, they were all invited to come to that show. And there was a moment like 2 days or the day before that show where Matthew, we got Matthew in the band a rehearsal space. I don't remember what it was called. And I flew out for the show, and Bud Scappa and I went over to the rehearsal, and it was this big empty room that had a couch on the long wall that had no legs and was sitting on floor level. And Bud and I sat on the couch and were watching them. And they did, and Greg Lees, who's the steel guitar player, he was performing with them at this showcase. And they did for us, You Don't Love Me, like a really extended version of You Don't Love Me, which you guys didn't really talk about when you talked about the record, but it's really one of my favorite songs.
Oh, it's a great song.
Yeah,
oh
we
my
love
God,
that song
I love
too.
that song.
That was accidental.
They did the song, and it was positively epic. I mean, it was one, I get chills now even talking about it. And Bud and I sat there, and it must have gone on for about 8 minutes. And Bud and I are sit there, and we kind of looked at each other and shook our heads. And it was like, everything we went through to put this record out was worth it because of this one moment. And we were the only people who saw it. I mean, the show was great at the Club Lingerie, but oh my God, that moment in the rehearsal was something I'll
it's
never
one of those moments where
forget.
the waters parted, everything,
Exactly.
one of those. Yeah, I get it.
Exactly. It was so wonderful.
So Scott, who was playing guitar on that?
Was Richard.
Okay.
It was the first band. It was
Okay.
I believe it was Drew Vogelman on drums, who was with a band from that Zoo sign called the Spellvins, who had a pretty good record that you guys might like, but went nowhere.
I'm going to write that down.
Tony Marsico, no, he came in later. Chris Hartford played bass in that first band. And Chris had a power pop record that came out on either A&M or Atlantic too, which you guys might like as well. But yeah, that was the band that he put together for the initial kind of promotional tour. I don't remember I believe Greg went out with them for the first set of dates. They might have done maybe 2 weeks or a month of shows. This was probably before you saw them.
Yeah, I saw him twice on the Girlfriend tour.
Yeah, I think you saw the band after those guys kind of.
Yeah, it was Ivan was playing guitar.
Ivan was late in the Girlfriend tour. Richard did the tour for a while, and Richard was a little bit of a tough guy to tour with. He was a little bit of a character, and I think Matthew wanted somebody a little more stable.
I can't remember what
was brilliant.
Scott. I can't remember what tour it was, but I did see. Oh my God, one of the Matthew Sweet shows, and Richard Lloyd did play, but it might have been.
Well, Richard came back and played on another
100% Fun, maybe? Was he
I believe
touring
so,
guitar player
but
for that?
He might have come out then, but as we'll get to later, I wasn't involved in 100% Fun after the making of the record.
Okay.
I mean, I basically made the record, and then I was done there, and they picked it up from there. So anyway, around this time, so we did another showcase at CMJ's convention in New York, which was basically a Zoo showcase with Matthew headlining. I don't remember who else was on the bill. It was done at the Wetlands, which was a great sort of downtown New York club, and we crammed everybody in. And I asked Lou to introduce Matthew, and he insisted that I do it. That's the only time I've ever introduced Matthew on stage. And I was not prepared. I probably just mumbled something and got the hell off the stage. But it was a really great night, and it kind of crystallized the support that we'd had from college radio up to that point. It was at the end of November, so the record came out in October, and it was right in the peak of the college radio success. It was a pretty great time. And around that time, we made the video. I don't remember the name of the director right now, but Matthew had contacts in the anime world, and he got the rights to use that footage, which was from Space Adventure Cobra, which was an anime film. And MTV was very supportive. There were a bunch of people in the MTV management at that time who were big fans. People that I was friends with too, which was great. And and then he went on tour, and we started to pick up commercial radio. And the plan was for I've Been Waiting to be the second single, so we got rights. Matthew wanted to use Lum for that video, so we got the rights to use that anime character, and we made the video. And we had a whole. There was an advance done for college radio to push I've Been Waiting, but really that was where we were going to try to cross things over to pop radio. And there was a commitment from MTV to put the video into rotation. And the person who was in charge of our pop radio promotion, he had a whole bunch of radio stations that had committed to play the song if MTV went ahead and did that. And then just before it was supposed to happen, there was a change in management at MTV. And basically what happened is, I remember I mentioned that commercial alternative radio had adopted Girlfriend after college radio. The one commercial alternative station that didn't play Girlfriend was the most important one, which was KROQ in Los Angeles. They didn't get it.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And
They
it was
didn't
very
get it?
frustrating. What?
You said they didn't get it?
They didn't get it. They didn't like it. They didn't play it. They didn't see it. And, that's terrible because, the company is based in Los Angeles. They are there. They go into the offices all the time. And they know it, the company knows it's doing well nationwide, but it's not being played in Los Angeles. That sucks.
When I think back to, I lived in Los Angeles from 97 to 2000. And when I think back to some of the things that they did push on KROQ, that just seems like a crime.
Well, but here's the thing. The people who took over management of MTV at the time were the same people who were running KROQ.
But wasn't Rodney Bingenheimer on KROQ then?
Yeah, but
Rodney would have gotten it.
Maybe he played it, but Rodney had 3 hours on a Sunday. That was his thing. He was an old timer who continued. I don't remember if Rodney played the records or not, but it wasn't in rotation.
Atlanta was one of the good markets.
Oh yeah, and
Chicago
was the biggest. DC was big. Atlanta was big. Even New York did pretty well. Boston did very well. I mean, BCN played it. All the big commercial alternative markets played the record, and with WXRT in Chicago leading the way. But KROQ did not play the record, and the people who took over the change in management were the same people from KROQ who didn't like Matthew, and they immediately scuttled the plan. And they said, we're not going to add the record next week. We're not going to add the video next week. And that was the end of that. And one of my friends at MTV actually called me on a Monday night and said, they're not adding the video. They dropped the video. And I called the head of promotion, who was at an adult alternative music convention in Denver. And I told him this news. And he freaked out and he flew to New York on the first plane the next morning, but he couldn't change their mind. And that basically is the reason why I've been waiting never made it in commercial radio, which, that was the plan from the beginning, was Girlfriend is the alternative hit. I've been waiting as the pop crossover. Never happened because of MTV not playing. I mean, MTV played the video on 120 minutes. But getting it into the regular rotation was where it was at when you're talking about pop radio. And they basically killed it off. But Matthew, he kept touring, and he even went to the UK at this point. He did a tour opening for Del Amitri. You remember them?
I remember them.
Yeah, I flew over and saw a couple of those shows. He also did a showcase at a Mexican restaurant that had a club in the basement. And it was, we tried to get some support, and it did okay. And he even went over to Japan at that time. Oh, and I wanted to explain to you guys about Japanese bonus tracks, since you didn't seem to get.
Well, I've got the 100% fun CD with all the bonus tracks on it.
The original Japanese, the thing about, and this is something. Did you see the Tower Records documentary?
I did.
All right, well, they talk about this a little bit in that documentary, that pricing of CDs in Japan was static, and it was much higher than American record prices. And when Tower moved into Japan, American imports became in fashion, and they were priced like $5 less than the static Japanese release prices.
Oh, really?
And to come, they were like $18 for a Japanese CD, and it was like 12 or 13 for an American CD that had been imported all the way from California. It was still 12 or $13. So they were undercutting the market. So what started happening, and this happened before Girlfriend came out there, was the Japanese company insisted that they put extra tracks on the Japanese release as an incentive for people to buy the higher priced Japanese version. And that was why almost every record that was released in Japan during that time had bonus tracks, because they weren't going to lower the prices, but and they weren't going to release the record without it. So we had to pick out bonus tracks. And that was where I believe the Japanese release of Girlfriend had those tracks on, had the three, the Good Friend, had the demo Good Friend and Superdeformed and Teenage Female. I think those were on the Japanese initial release as well. You're looking at Discogs, Grant?
Great minds think alike there, Scott.
So, that's why they all had bonus tracks, was because you couldn't get Japanese release. And Matthew loved Japan, so he went over there. And Matthew was actually deathly afraid of flying at this time. And when he went to England for the Delamitri tour, he actually took a boat because he didn't want to fly. And but for Japan, which was so important to him, he flew. He flew all the way to Japan and he did a bunch of like in stores and TV appearances and radio appearances, and that was very important to him. But that was basically what wrapped up the Girlfriend project. We released Evangeline to commercial alternative radio, and it did okay, but it was not like a major hit. And then we did.
I can't understand that, because I think Evangeline's like one of the best tracks on the record. But who am I?
I agree. To wrap up the project, Bud and I put together the Good Friend promotional album, which I'm sure you're aware of. This thing.
Yeah, I've got the Record Store Day version of it, and I've got the original CD of it. And actually, Todd's got my other promo when it was, what was it, Todd? Who's the other artist on there?
It comes in a package. It looks like this.
Yeah, I sent that to
And then it's also got
that was Album Network magazine. Put it in.
Yeah, and it's also got the other disc is like a compilation. It's like Paul Weller, Keith Richards, Jeff Healey.
Album Network was another trade magazine, kind of like CMJ, but for commercial radio, and they would sometimes do the bonus there. But we put this out. The original intention was just to do it as a thank you for the people who had really supported the record at retail and at commercial alternative radio and college radio. I think we did, maybe 1,000 copies, something like that, and just sent them out. And there was discussion for a little while about releasing it as an album, but the BMG, which was Zoo's parent label, was a union house. And, we were all fine with that. But if we wanted to release the record commercially, we would have needed to seek out and get contracts signed by every person who was on the record and pay them all union wages. So going from being basically a free project to being something that was going to cost us, tens or maybe tens of thousands of dollars just to get the rights to release it seemed silly. So we just did it as a promotional release. And the same thing with that Album Network thing. And, and as you know, by this time, Matthew was into Neil Young, and this is a takeoff of the cover of Zuma, which was a great Neil Young album. And regarding Good Friends, you mentioned the original recording on there of Someone to Pull the Trigger.
Yes.
Now you remember that there's actually another recording on there from that same session, but you've heard of BBC sessions?
Yep.
That a zillion people have done over the years. While Matthew was over there during doing the Delamitri tour, he was invited to do a session, a BBC session. He didn't do it for John Peel. The most famous ones are the Peel sessions. He did it for one of the other DJs on the BBC. I don't remember which one it was right now, but they were doing some play on one of the BBC networks. and they invited him to do a session. And basically a session was you come into Maida Vale, which was BBC's studio, and you can record 4 songs of your choice. And Matthew had written Someone to Pull the Trigger on the tour bus. He had never recorded it. He had never demoed it. It was all in his head. But he took his touring band and he went in there and he taught them the song, and they did it as as part of the BBC session. And they did, Good Friend, an acoustic version of Girlfriend, and 2 other songs which I don't remember right now. Somewhere I have a DAT of the session, but they did 4 songs. I did a search. I know you're searching, Grant, but I did a search to try to find it, and I didn't find it. So it's not listed online anywhere what was in the BBC session, but that's where the 2 Maida Vale recordings.
I think Girlfriend was one of them because it's the same
Right.
producer, Simon Eskew. I'm just looking.
Right, that's the BBC producer who was in the studio that day. But they did 4 songs, which were broadcast on this guy's show, and we loved them, so we put them on Good Friends. And there was and the live tracks from San Diego were done for Westwood One. Westwood One had done a recording of Matthew had opened a tour for towards the end there, he opened a tour for the Indigo Girls. I got to see that show at Red Rocks in Denver, which was amazing. But Westwood One recorded the show, and we used the tapes for various things. There was a college radio concert, there was a commercial radio concert, but we were able to license a bunch of live recordings for that, and some demos. And Bud and I put this together, and it was really a labor of love to kind of, cap off the project. I'm just going to look at the track listing here and see if there's any more stories from that. And then when it was, and I know you noticed this when you were talking about Altered Beast, but when it was time to do Altered Beast, Matthew loved the way the drums sounded on that BBC session. So we got permission to actually use the original BBC session tapes as the foundation for the Altered Beast version of Someone to Pull the Trigger.
Oh.
Is there anything else?
Well, I always thought that they were kind of similar to some degree,
Yep. What are the ones with the, I don't remember which ones are live, and some of them are, acoustic recordings that Matthew made at home. Divine Intervention, Looking at the Sun, Winona, and Isolation. I think he did them for this record. And then there's the live tracks and the Maida Vale recordings. So that basically was the end of Girlfriend.